freedom is all about. That it astounds me that the American people put up with this. But it is ultimately our personal liberties that we have to protect. Foreign policy is important. It's important because it is that part that protects our personal liberty the most. That once you have a war mentality, whether it's a war in Iraq, war against terrorism, war against drugs, war against who knows what, then the people, oh, there's a war going on, I have to sacrifice. Believe me, there is absolutely never a need to sacrifice one drop of freedom to protect our safety. Matter of fact, we will obviously be less safe. There's not a whole lot that we can change in a hurry, but there's a lot that we can do. But we have to put it into perspective. We have to decide whether we want to live in a free country and whether or not we want to live under the rule of law. We don't have a perfect constitution. We have a good constitution, probably the best ever written, for a contract between the people and the government. But we have drifted from that. We ignore it under the war conditions, the welfare provisions, the monetary provisions. So it has no meaning for the Congress, no meaning for the courts, and no meaning for our presidents. And until we get the rule of law back and our goal being individual liberty, this country is going to be in worse shape on a daily basis. But there is no reason to believe that we can't restore those principles. There's a lot of people in this country who care, and I have met a lot of them in the last 6 months, and there are a lot more than I ever dreamed of. And they're very, very interested in saying, yes, I'm willing to assume the responsibility for myself in a free society. I want the government out of my pockets and out of my bedrooms and off my back, and I want to bring our troops home, and I want a sensible foreign policy, and I want a government that will protect us and protect our liberties. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask one question, and then Andrew will ask a question, then we'll open it up to the floor. Just raise your hand and say your name and who you're with, if you're a student, if you're not a student, affiliation. Since today's 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11, I'd like to ask you what you mean. Do you really think the United States is in any way responsible for 9/11, as incredible as that sounds?
No, the people certainly aren't. Americans aren't responsible. Nobody in this room is responsible. I'm not responsible. But bad policy is a major participant in it. The ultimate moral responsibility falls on the people who committed the crime, the ultimate crime. Of course, they're all dead. So you have to understand suicide terrorism. But the American people aren't responsible. We have to understand there's a difference between the American people and our government and government policy. So if there's 12 people in our government who design our policy and we're too complacent, or we're not told, or we're told or given the wrong information and we go along with it, you're not responsible. The most responsibility would be maybe our lack of inclination to find out exactly what's going on. But in that way, the American people aren't responsible at all. But our policy is very important to understand why somebody took it upon themselves to want to do so much harm to us.
You don't think any of these terrorists would have done this if we hadn't had troops in the Middle East?
I actually believe that if we had never been in the Middle East in the last 50 years, I do not believe we would have a terrorism attack on us. I actually believe that to be the case.
You very eloquently outlined the unintended consequences of past foreign policy mistakes. But as president, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to change history. You would have to either decide to deal with the unintended consequences or ignore them. So to take one example of a foreign policy challenge facing the US right now, Iran openly states its ambition to become the dominant power in the Middle East. Its president has even talked about wiping Israel off the map. The Bush administration believes its pursuit of nuclear weapons is a grave threat that must be confronted. How would you respond to the perceived threat posed by Iran as president?
Probably a lot like we responded and treated the Soviets and the Chinese and the Pakistani and the Indians, Israel, everybody who has nukes are potentially, likely to have some of that information leak